I was going to complain about the rain as I was driving here, but we need it badly. So glad we're having it, and glad you all made it out. We were talking at our table. It's a little like church today. Nobody in the front pew, everybody in the back, but that's okay. We'll have some fun. Thank you so much for having me and for the kind introduction. My name is Daniel Erspamer, and I'm CEO of the Pelican Institute for Public Policy. And Pelican Institute is Louisiana's free market think tank. And what that means is our job is to research, to study data, to better understand what are the policy conditions that lead to success. And our mission is that every person in Louisiana should have the opportunity to succeed. At the end of the day, we want policies that allow every person to pursue the American dream, to pursue success and pursue opportunity. And so that's what we spend our days, our time, our resources pursuing, and following that data and then selling it, making recommendations to legislators. Senator Ala is here. Thank you for your time, lots that we've done together over the years. And then going around the state and educating citizens and really trying to build support for the ideas that create a free society, that create opportunity for everyone. So we've been traveling all over the state, particularly this year in an important election year. I believe this is parish number 52 or 53 for our team in taking this message for jobs and opportunity out. So I really appreciate you being here, and thank you for being engaged. My goal here is to talk through some of Louisiana's biggest challenges and our recommendations for how to fix them. And my encouragement is for you to remain engaged. We'll get to that some at the end, but it's easy to get all in on an election campaign and pay attention, and we've got constitutional amendments on the ballot and elections on the ballot. I know we have a runoff here, and then we all have to go back to our jobs and families and businesses while the men and women go to Baton Rouge that represent us, and sometimes we lose focus. And that's where, over the next few years, it's going to be critically important that we stay engaged, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So I want to start with 4 numbers that I think will outline some of the biggest challenges, and we'll talk through solutions. Does that sound like a plan? All right, let's do it. So 4 numbers: 432, 50, 13,000, and 33. 432, 50, 13,000, and 33. Before I get through these, let me suggest a bigger picture thought. The last time Louisiana grew faster than the rest of the country was in 1910. Let that sink in for a minute. Given our resources, right? Louisiana ought to be the economic powerhouse, certainly of the Southeast, if not the country. We're not some landlocked state in the middle of nowhere that doesn't have anything going for us, right? We have assets that places all around the world would love to have. 5 of the top 15 ports in the country, the most active natural gas sector, some of the most oil refineries of any place in the country, the mouth of the Mississippi River, ready and inexpensive access to land and water and energy. People come here by the millions to play, to hunt, to fish, to go to Mardi Gras, to go to festivals, to eat our food, to hear our music. And yet, not only are we not growing faster than the rest of the country, in fact, we have the 3rd highest outmigration of any state in the country. 3rd highest. That means the 3rd highest percentage of our people leaving for other states. Anybody want to guess the 2 higher than us? New York, yep, that's 1. California. Illinois is right on our heels. I don't know about you, but that's not a list I want to be on. We talk a lot about being at the top of the bad list and the bottom of the good list, right? And that's true all too often. And yet we have these assets. So the challenge I would give to you, the thing I would assert, is we're in this place not because we don't have the resources to succeed. Not because we don't have the people to succeed. It's because we've made poor policy decisions that have got us into this mess. The good news of that is we can change that. We can't change our natural resources. We can't change the weather. That's maybe one thing that's in the negative, but there's a lot we can change. And that means we can turn Louisiana around. We can right Louisiana's comeback story. So let's talk about a few things I believe lead us to where we are. 432. 432 is the number of pages in just one section of the Louisiana tax code that represents corporate special preferences for taxes. Carve-outs, deductions, credits, 432 pages of tax preferences in just the corporate tax code alone. What this represents is just the deep complexity of our tax code. You know, we could argue all day long, and should, about our taxes too high, our taxes too low, but the reality is we can't even get to that answer because taxes are too complex, something Senator Allen has been working quite a bit on with his colleagues. And the challenge here is if someone or some special group pays less taxes, that means somebody else has to pay more, basically to raise the same amount of money, right? And so the challenge we have is when you have so many carve-outs and deductions, if you're an incumbent business with a good lawyer and a good accountant and a good lobbyist, you can do pretty well. But if you're looking to come here from another state, if you're an entrepreneur trying to build a company, trying to build an enterprise, it's very, very challenging. Our tax code penalizes that through its complexity. We could solve tremendous challenges in our state's economy just by starting with Simplify the Tax Code. Now, just a few weeks ago, the Pelican Institute released a plan that would phase out the personal income tax over the next 8 years without having to raise taxes elsewhere, without having to offset. What this does is it controls, and we'll get to this in a minute, the growth of spending in order to phase down and ultimately out the personal income tax. Step one of this plan is move immediately from a graduated income tax to a flat tax. What this does, just going to a flat tax, we ran this, had an economic analysis firm model this. In the first year alone of moving to a flat tax, we get 4,000 new jobs and $1 billion of new economic activity. Just moving to a flat tax before we've eliminated the whole thing. In the first year alone, that's significant change that we can do. This is within our grasp right now. This is an opportunity we have to send a message to entrepreneurs, companies, all those companies that are moving out of New York and Illinois and California, and right now they're going to Texas and Tennessee and Florida, and even now Arkansas and Mississippi, which we used to make fun of, but now even they're passing us by. That's the state we're in right now. And we can do this. This is within our grasp. The challenge, of course, is spending. If we can't control the growth of spending, it's impossible to lower the tax burden and make it to where Louisiana businesses and families can succeed. So that 50 is $50 billion. I think, Senator, it's 51 now was the last count. $51 billion is the budget for the state of Louisiana this fiscal year for 4.6 million people. It's one of the highest per capita of any state in the country, and certainly one of the highest of the Southeast. We're actually middle of the top in the country, the highest in the Southeast. And this is a growth. Just 8 years ago, the total budget was $28 billion. Now, a lot of that is federal money. No doubt about it. The federal government has been shoveling cash at us. Now, the reality is we got to remember that's our tax money too. There's not a magical money tree in Washington, D.C. Actually, in reality, that's our grandkids and great-grandkids' money, given the rate at which we're borrowing to get that money. But that's substantial growth. I don't know about you, but my household budget has not doubled in the last year. I suspect most of in the last 8 years. I suspect most of your budgets and small business budgets haven't done the same. And if we just look at the state general fund, that's moved from just under $10 billion to about $14 or $15 billion. That's a substantial growth just in the state collection of taxes. And this is all in a time, if you remember, when our governor was telling us we didn't have enough money, we're going to cancel LSU football and close down state offices. Remember all these? We talked about fiscal cliff after fiscal cliff. The reality is we're just spending so much money. It doesn't mean there isn't reform that needs to be done. It doesn't mean that, again, we didn't need to fix the tax code. We don't need to spend and invest on priorities like infrastructure. Those are all true. But if we don't control our regular ongoing spending, if we don't invest those dollars in achieving tax relief and tax reform, then we're just going to continue in the same cycle of problems that we've had for the last several decades. You know, I mentioned it, the last time Louisiana grew faster than the rest of the country was 1910. And if we think about what happened since then, certainly the 1920s were dominated by one figure in Louisiana politics, Huey Long. And if you remember, when Huey Long was running for governor, he had two main thrusts, right? The first was every man a millionaire, which of course in the 1920s was absurd. It remains absurd today. But he was going to do that, right, by punishing Standard Oil. That was the basis of his campaign, right? We're going to take from Standard Oil and use that to invest in roads and bridges and make every man a millionaire. Well, this redistributionist policy hasn't worked then and it doesn't work now. But yet that is the structure of Louisiana's tax and spend code. That is the structure of Louisiana government. I know there's a few local government leaders in the room today. You know this story all too well. To control your fiscal destiny, you have to go ask for permission up in Baton Rouge, right? Instead, we need a system that allows local government to be governed locally by its voters and its leaders, and for Baton Rouge to focus on the state. But we have this structure of government that Huey set up, that all roads lead to Baton Rouge and everybody has to come kiss the ring. And if we don't correct this, and this is true in taxes, this is true in spending, it's been upheld now by 3 state constitutions. That's the challenge and the mess we're in. Now, the Constitution is important too, and it has an impact on spending. 13,000 is the number of words in the Louisiana State Constitution just focused on how lawmakers ought to spend money. Just the fiscal session, 13,000 words. Now, I like comparisons, so I looked it up. The United States Constitution and all of its amendments, I think we would probably all agree, pretty good document, has withstood the test of time. The entire U.S. Constitution is 7,591 words. So we have almost double the entirety of the American experiment just on how lawmakers should spend our money. Now, here's one of the ways this works is they're something called dedicated funds, right? If you hear the words dedicated funds, I want you to think non-reviewed government spending. This is something that either voters or lawmakers, whether it's in the Constitution or in statute, have decided a program is a priority forevermore. And usually the way this works is some lawmaker has gone and fought for spending for some important program and fought for it every year, and it goes through the process. And then they realize they may not be there forever. And now with term limits, they certainly won't be. And so let's make sure that priority is a priority forever and ever and ever. We're going to lock it up in a dedicated fund. Now, again, think about how this might impact you or your family or your family business, right? So the result of this, the result of those 13,000 words and other statutes is that when lawmakers walk in, they only have discretionary authority over about 11% of that $51 billion. So could you run your household budget or your small business budget if 90%, 9 out of every $10 was pre-spent for you? And in many cases, pre-spent for you by your crazy uncle 50 years ago, right? We've had our fair share as well of crazy uncles in Louisiana politics. And so that's what happens. They represent a priority from decades ago. Think about how maybe your own spending has changed, even in just the last 5 or 10 years. Priorities shift, and one of the most important things we send lawmakers to Baton Rouge to do is to decide how to spend our tax money when we send it there and make the best use of it. But we tie the hands of lawmakers, many of whom are there to do the right thing, to serve their constituents and make the right policies, but they have very little control over what to do. Again, almost 9 out of every $10 pre-spent before they even discuss it. If we're going to solve this challenge, if we're going to be able to genuinely constrain spending so that we can fix the tax code, so that we can do all these other things, we're going to have to free them up and take a look at the Constitution and understand what are the structural changes in our government that we need in order to be successful. Now, the last thing I mentioned was 33, the last number. 33, this deals with another really important issue. We spent a lot of time talking about the fiscal house, getting our fiscal house in order, taxes and spending. That has a huge impact on the future of the state of Louisiana. But the other thing that does is education. 33 represents the percentage, 33% of Louisiana students right now are reading and doing math at grade level. Only 3 parishes in the entire state have more than half of their students reading and doing math at grade level. We're at a significant crisis in our education system, and it's not because the hard work of our teachers and administrators, that's all true. They're working hard every day. They're in a difficult challenge. And by the way, we spend more per student in Louisiana, around $14,000 on average. It depends parish by parish, but statewide average is about $14,000. If you want to see the stats right here, you can go to the Pelican Institute's website. We have an education dashboard there that'll show you the student outcome results for this parish, the per pupil spending, all the information you may want to see. That's pelicanpolicy.org. You can see that dashboard along with lots of stuff there. But we're spending about $14,000 on average per kid, which is more than Texas, which is more than Mississippi, which is more than Arkansas, and yet our student outcomes are worse and we're paying our teachers less. Thankfully this year, after several years of trying, the legislature passed a really important measure that puts transparency to our education dollars, that ensures as taxpayers, as voters, as constituents, as parents, that we can see every penny that's being spent in our school district. So that'll be up and running on the Treasurer's website, we hope here within, right after the first of the year. That'll provide much needed transparency to all this dollars. We're spending lots of money and even more money. The federal government put an additional $4 billion in Louisiana schools in the last 2 years after COVID. We're swimming in money. Anybody who tells you money is the problem, they're just not telling you the truth. The fact of the matter is we're based on a system that no longer works. We talked about evolving priorities. Fun fact, the very first compulsory public education law in America was passed in Massachusetts in the 1600s. This is the basic structure by which we still deliver public education today. That law was passed, if you go back and look at the history, for one reason. Their objective was to prevent young women from becoming witches. It's absolutely true. Now, we could debate maybe how well that's worked over the years. That's a whole different conversation. But the fact of the matter is the whole structure of our education system was based on a structure that could socialize and bring particularly young women together so that they would not become witches. There's a heavy dose of Bible study in that curriculum at the time. And certainly curriculum and things have changed, but the basic structure hasn't. And the fact of the matter is we need something different. That works great for some kids. For other kids, it doesn't. I have 4 kids at home. They're aged 8 to 15. And one of the things we really learned as we were going through the lockdowns is all 4 of those kids learn very differently, right? If you have kids or grandkids at home, you saw it too. I had one that was up at 7 o'clock every morning during the lockdowns. He plugged through his work. He got it done. He knew what he needed to do, and he spent the rest of the day playing basketball. I had one I had to drag across the kitchen floor, even just to sit down and do her worksheets. And if you've ever had to try to get a kindergartner to sit in front of Zoom for a few hours, you know a really special level of patience or lack thereof. What we learned from that, though, is that every kid learns differently. The very best school in the world isn't going to work for some kids. And so at the Pelican Institute, we have a fundamental belief that every child in Louisiana deserves the opportunity to attend a school that fits him or her. And one way we can do this that I believe will be a really high priority and a big debate in the next legislature is something called education scholarship accounts. There are now 10 states in the country that allow universal application of these kinds of accounts. The way it works is it takes an average of the state dollars, and those are allowed to follow the kid to the school of their choice. And it can look differently. It can be a home study program. It could be a private school. It could be another public school. It could be a public charter school. It could be a co-op. It could be a micro school. It could be any number of these things. We saw a boom in educational entrepreneurship in the course of the pandemic. Anybody's kids or grandkids use Khan Academy over the last few years? Amazing stuff out there. And now we have the chance to make sure every child has access to a school that fits him or her, because zone public school may work great for some and may not work great for other kids. What we're seeing now in other states is this is working phenomenally well. Florida is the state that has the longest track record of education freedom programs, and so it gives us the best data. And here's the good news. 1, the kids, this makes sense, the kids and families who choose to take those dollars and go to a different school, their educational outcomes improve. That would make sense. Here's the part that may not be as obvious that the data are showing now. The kids who either choose to stay in the zone public school or stay for whatever reason, their educational outcomes are also now increasing. since the choice programs have been passed. Competition works, friends. We believe this in our business lives. This is true everywhere else except really in this one area, right? Here's the other thing that the data are not yet clear, but we're beginning to see. Not only is there competition in the market for students, there's competition in the market for great teachers. And you know what that means? Teacher salaries are beginning to rise, right? This is what we want. It's a win-win-win for everyone. There's no doubt. This is a disruption to the current way we deliver education. It's a disruption to the system as we know it today. But if our goal, and it is for us, is to focus on the kids and to focus on their student outcomes, we need not worry about the system. We need worry about the kids and figure out the strategy and the system that gets us there. So all these things together present, again, significant challenges. Our kids are leaving us, our kids and grandkids. We're having trouble finding workers. We were talking at our table, we could do a whole other talk, have me back another time, on free market solutions to poverty and workforce. We've got a big project coming on that soon. But what we know is if we don't take some big effort, if we don't really engage, we're going to keep doing it the same thing we've always done. And if you remember, right, the famous quote attributed to Einstein, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So it's time to do something different. It's time to come together, to stand up and say we want change. We've got to have a new vision for the state, and here's the biggest challenge to it. There are special interests in that capital who want nothing to change. There are consultants who make a commission when they negotiate a new tax credit. The incentives are aligned for people in the system to benefit from it, while the rest of us suffer. The only way we counter those special interests, the only way we counter, and there's nothing wrong with lobbyists, there's nothing wrong, everyone's fighting for their piece of the pie, and I get it. That's the structure Huey Long set up. But if we're going to change this, we've got to come together and say, we the people demand change. And we can do it. The solutions are there. If you want to read about any of these or any number of other policies, we cover a wide range of policies. Again, we have deep, by the way, if you're looking to having a hard time sleeping at night, I do have a 30-some-odd page tax paper that'll really get you right on there to sleep. But there's a 2-page summary as well, fear not. Maybe don't listen to it while you're driving. But this is the kind of stuff we've got to get at the data. We've got to understand what works. We've got to follow the evidence. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We know the answers to this. The key is get those answers in front of lawmakers. Understand and help them understand that it's in their interest and all of our interests to do well. That means reach out to lawmakers, not just when you're mad at them, but when you agree with them too. You'd love to hear a thank you call every now and then, huh? Right? So this is the way we've got to come together. So I make this plea to you, and I'll close with this. You're the people, you have influence in your community. You're the business leaders, the civic leaders, the community leaders. You're the people your friends and neighbors call and say, what's on the ballot this time, right? That's you. So take that beyond the election cycle. Take that to this legislative session. Get involved, whether it's with the Pelican Institute or someone else, or start your own group. If you're interested in the issues we have to talk about, if you sign up for our newsletter at pelicanpolicy.org, we'll email you when these issues are coming up to the legislature. We'll give you the platform that you can use to communicate with your lawmaker with all their contact information. We'll help you do that, but there's lots of groups that you can do that with as well. So I hope this club stays engaged in these issues. I hope you all stay engaged, and I hope we can work together to really create a hopeful and positive future for Louisiana, because it's there. The asset's there. We just have to make the right decision. So thank you so much for your time and attention. Thanks for letting me come here. I think we may have about 10 minutes for some questions if anybody has any, but thank you all for having me here. Any questions? Yes, sir.
What's the chances of a constitutional convention on the?
It's a great question. The question was, what are the chances of a constitutional convention? I think there's going to be, I don't know is the short answer. I don't have a crystal ball. We've been doing a lot of work on the Constitution. So if you go to the Pelican Institute's website, you can find a report that lays out principles of effective state constitutions. What should a constitution do? Our Constitution is the second longest in the country. Since it was ratified in 1974, it's been amended more than 200 times. It's now 80,000 words long. And it's a real challenge. Basically, we don't have a state constitution. We have a set of statute we've given super constitutional authority. A constitution is supposed to set the rules of government, to set the structure, to constrain government in favor of individual liberty, and ours really does the opposite of that. So it's in need of real reform. I believe there will be a significant push in the next year and a half for whether it's a constitutional convention or a significant change that moves to the legislature to rewrite large sections of the Constitution. I believe that's going to be a big issue of conversation. Of course, any change to the Constitution has to be approved by voters. So the process to call a convention would mean a 2/3 vote from each chamber of the legislature could call a convention. Whatever they produce would then be subject to a vote of the people. A majority of voters would have to approve it. So I think it's better. There's a better chance today than there was 6 weeks ago. I think there will be more discussion of it in the coming months. Whether we can overcome the special interests and folks who don't want change is a big open question, and it's risky. There's no question about it. Once you start writing stuff, people fear change. But I think if we can come together and have a big public conversation about what a constitution should be, we can begin to align around that. So it's a long answer to basically say I don't know, but I hope it comes together, and I think there will be a significant conversation about it. Absolutely better than last year. Thanks for the question.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So you want to talk about numbers. 4 years ago, what was the top personal income tax rate?
Top personal income tax was 6% 2 years ago.
And what is it now?
4.25%.
And
Big change.
And with the triggers in place that I believe we'll hit this year,
That's right.
what will it go to?
I believe that number is just under 4. Is that right? 3.85? Yep. This is a really important thing. Thank you, Senator, for your leadership on this. You voters approved a package of bills that Senator Allen really led and made happen that did a couple of important things. It traded off some complexity. We talked about that in favor of lower rates. The most important thing it did is it removed those rates to the point of constitutional reform. It moved those rates out of the Constitution. And now this legislature and this governor will have a chance to lower those rates further or make substantial changes without having to go back to voters. Now, to raise taxes, they still have to get a 2/3 vote in both chambers. But thanks to your work, we've made significant progress lowering those and set up what comes next.
Oh, it's not done.
Okay.
What's the worst tax on the books?
The franchise tax.
And if the triggers hit, what will that go to this year?
If the triggers hit, the franchise tax goes to 0.
Correct. We will have done away with it. Last question.
Yes, sir.
4 years ago, how much was in the rainy day fund?
$400 million.
Okay. And today?
$900 million.
And
Plus
the
an
revenue
additional
stabilization fund.
plus an
4 years
additional
ago was,
0.
and at the end of this year, there'll be,
It looks like about $3 billion.
correct. So we did save some money.
No question about it. Here, here. Thank you for that. And it brings up a good point. While we have a lot of challenges, this legislature took some really important steps to set up success in a governor that was not friendly and did not have an interest in seeing those reforms. And in some ways, that makes it even more impressive to do that through the legislature without the support of the governor. So kudos, Senator, of course, to you and to your colleagues who've done really important work, particularly on tax reform, and made some important progress on education too. So it's not to suggest nothing has been done in the last 8 years. It certainly has. I believe we have an opportunity now to take that work, build on it, and really do some transformational things if we can all come together. So thank you. All right, I'm getting the hook. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much for your informative presentation. I'd just like to say we're coming up on the end of our first year. We're proud to say that we've got 141 members. We're very successful in this first year. Next month, on December the 11th, we'll have a members-only luncheon. And the word that Daniel used, and I heard a couple other people use, is we want to be engaged. This is your opportunity to come to us and tell us how you want to proceed in the future. We want to move forward. We want to be on 160, 170 people next year, but we want to have a cause. We want to do things. So come with ideas and engage with us at the next meeting, which is December the 11th. We thank you for that. We don't have a speaker in December, and we're working on an exciting program in January, but we do have Commander Mary Gilday of the Coast Guard here in Morgan City, and her team will speak at our February meeting. And we've also gone back and we've engaged Congressman Graves. Unfortunately, he was called back for the somewhat nonsense going on in Washington and hasn't been able to make the two invitations, but he said he will make the next one. And for that, that's all I've got. Have a safe trip back to your work, and you have a safe trip home. Thank you very much.